She walked into the dealership in faded jeans and a plain white t-shirt, her eyes scanning the showroom filled with gleaming luxury cars. As she approached a sleek high-end model, a salesman gave her a once-over, his lips curling in barely concealed disdain. "Miss, I believe you might be in the wrong place," he sneered, tilting his head toward the exit. "These vehicles start at $300,000. Nearby staff chuckled while a few customers cast judgmental glances in her direction. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she said nothing. Instead, she turned on her heel and walked out, her silence more powerful than any response she could have given. The next morning, the unmistakable hum of a Rolls-Royce Phantom's engine silenced all chatter in the dealership. Heads turned as the luxury car glided to a stop right outside the showroom. When the back door opened, the salesman's smirk vanished in an instant. He never saw it coming. Boston Elite Motors stood as a beacon of sophistication, its glass walls reflecting the morning sun. Inside, an array of high-performance vehicles, Porsche, Bentley, Aston Martin, Ferrari, stood proudly under the bright showroom lights. Each one was more extravagant than the last. Margaret Collins, Maggie, to those who truly knew her, stepped through the doors with quiet confidence. Her brown ponytail bounced lightly with each step, her outfit unchanged from the previous day. No designer labels, no flashy jewelry. Just the same simple white t-shirt and well-worn jeans. What few in the showroom knew was that Maggie was the powerhouse behind the Collins Foundation for Children with Disabilities. She had dedicated years to building the organization from the ground up, ensuring that thousands of young lives were transformed for the better. Despite her success, she had never been one to flaunt wealth. Today, she was here for a reason. Her sister's 40th birthday was coming up, and after surviving a grueling battle with breast cancer, Maggie wanted to give her something truly special. Her eyes locked onto a sleek midnight blue coupe, a car her sister had always dreamed of owning. Blake Thompson straightened his tie and adjusted his tailored navy suit. As the dealership's sales manager, he prided himself on his ability to spot serious buyers at a glance. And from what he could see, Maggie wasn't one of them. His smirk widened as he nudged a colleague. This, he thought, would be entertaining. "Good morning." Maggie greeted warmly as a young salesman named Daniel approached her. "Welcome to Boston Elite Motors. I'm Daniel. Is there a particular model you're interested in today?" he asked politely. Before Maggie could respond, Blake stepped forward, his smile calculated and insincere. "I'll handle this, Daniel," he said smoothly. Then, turning to Maggie, he added, "Looking for directions, ma'am?" Maggie didn't flinch. "Actually," she said, "I'm interested in that midnight blue coupe over there." Blake's smile faltered, his jaw tightening. He had encountered this scenario before, window shoppers indulging in fantasies they could never afford. And with end-of-month quotas looming, he had no time for time-wasters. "That's the limited edition Azure," he said slowly, as if explaining to a child. "Only 15 were made this year. Perhaps I could direct you to our pre-owned section? It's just a few blocks down the road." Maggie caught how his eyes lingered on her scuffed sneakers, his silent judgment palpable. She had seen this treatment before and had long since stopped being surprised by it. "I'd really love to see the interior," she persisted, her voice pleasant but firm. Blake's expression darkened slightly. Behind him, two other salesmen exchanged knowing glances, stifling chuckles. "By appointment only," he lied effortlessly. "Our serious clients schedule private viewings in advance." Just then, the showroom doors opened, and a well-dressed couple stepped inside. The shift in Blake's demeanor was immediate. Gone was the condescension, replaced by a warm, enthusiastic welcome. "Please excuse me," he told Maggie dismissively. "Why don't you take a brochure? Daniel can assist you with that." And with that, he strode toward the couple, all smiles. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, wonderful to see you again." Daniel turned back to Maggie, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm really sorry about that," he murmured. "Would you still like some details on the Azure?" Maggie nodded. "I would, thank you." As Daniel enthusiastically ran through the car's features, Maggie's gaze drifted across the showroom. There, just a few feet away, Blake was in the middle of his well-rehearsed pitch to the affluent couple. "This particular model has an 8-month waiting list, but I've managed to secure one for my VIP clients," he said smoothly. Mrs. Harrington ran a manicured hand along the supple leather interior. "It's gorgeous, but I'm not sure about the color." "We can discuss custom options," Blake assured her, practically beaming. Maggie stepped closer, her voice calm yet deliberate. "Excuse me," she said. "I was hoping to inquire about purchasing this model." Blake's smile froze. His eyes hardened as he turned to her. "As I mentioned earlier, this vehicle is being shown to these clients," he said curtly. "Perhaps you could come back another time." Or, as I suggested, check out our pre-owned inventory. The couple exchanged awkward glances, suddenly aware of the tension in the air. But Maggie simply smiled. She understood exactly how these things worked. And soon, so would they. Maggie met Blake's stare head-on, her voice unwavering. "I'm specifically interested in this car," she said. "It's for my sister's birthday next month." Blake exhaled sharply, stepping away from the Harringtons. Lowering his voice, he muttered, "Look, I understand people like to dream, but this is a place of business. That vehicle costs more than most homes. Now, I've been patient, but you're interrupting a legitimate sale." Nearby customers had begun to take notice of the tense exchange. Daniel lingered nervously on the edge of the scene, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm prepared to make a cash purchase today," Maggie said, her tone calm but firm. Blake's carefully maintained professionalism finally cracked. He let out a short, derisive laugh that echoed across the showroom, drawing even more attention. "A cash purchase?" he repeated mockingly. "Really? This isn't a flea market. We're talking about $250,000. People who can afford these cars don't dress like—" He gestured dismissively at her outfit, smirking. Maggie felt the heat rise to her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from the slow burn of anger. Not for herself. She had experienced this kind of judgment before, but for anyone who had ever been belittled for how they looked. "I believe my money is as good as anyone else's," she said quietly. Blake stepped closer, towering over her. "Let me be clear," he said, no longer bothering to hide his disdain. "You are wasting my time and embarrassing yourself. Either make an appointment for a serious discussion, dressed appropriately, or please leave the premises." The showroom had fallen completely silent. Even the Harringtons had stepped away from the car, looking visibly uncomfortable. "Is there a problem here?" A new voice broke the tension. Richard Mason, the dealership's owner, had approached, drawn by the commotion. Blake straightened his tie, slipping back into professional mode. "No problem, sir. Just explaining to this lady that we operate by appointment for serious buyers." Richard studied Maggie carefully, his expression unreadable. He took in her simple appearance, the watching crowd, and the tension in the air. "I see," he said finally. "Miss Collins," Maggie supplied. "Margaret Collins." Richard nodded. "Miss Collins, perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. Our clientele typically, well, they understand the exclusivity of our vehicles." Maggie's jaw tightened, though she kept her voice steady. "I understand perfectly. Your sales manager has made your policies quite clear." Blake took a step forward, his condescension now blatant. "If you're genuinely interested, which I doubt, you can call for an appointment. But I'd suggest bringing proof of funds and dressing the part. These cars," he gestured grandly around the showroom, "are for a certain class of people." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Someone snickered. Maggie glanced around, taking in the judging faces, the smugness on Blake's expression, the way Richard Mason neither corrected nor disagreed with his employee. She had faced prejudice before, but rarely this openly, this publicly. She exhaled slowly. "I see." And with her dignity intact but spirits bruised, she turned and walked toward the exit. As she reached the glass doors, she caught Blake's voice, not quite hushed enough. "Some people just don't know their place." Maggie pushed through the doors and stepped into the bright morning sunlight. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out her phone. The sting of humiliation still lingered, but a small, resolute smile touched her lips as she dialed. The Collins estate sat on 5 secluded acres just outside Boston. Understated yet elegant, it revealed nothing of the immense fortune behind its ownership. Alexander Collins preferred it that way. At 41, Alexander was a visionary in the tech world, having revolutionized renewable energy storage. His innovations had made him a billionaire, though he had always maintained a deliberately low profile. When Maggie entered his home office, Alexander looked up immediately, setting aside his work. 15 years of marriage had given him an uncanny ability to read her moods. Something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, moving around his desk to meet her. Maggie sank into a leather chair, exhaling slowly. The morning's events replayed in her mind, the sting fresh as she recounted the story. She described the dismissiveness, the humiliation, the way she had been judged not by her intentions but by her appearance. Alexander listened intently, his expression darkening. But he didn't interrupt. He let her finish, giving her space to process. "It's not about me," Maggie concluded. "I have the privilege of walking away knowing the truth. But how many people get treated like that every day? People who don't have the comfort of knowing they could actually afford what they're being denied." Alexander nodded thoughtfully. He had always admired this about Maggie, her ability to see past her own pain and focus on the bigger picture. "So," he said finally, "what do you want to do about it?" Maggie hesitated. "Part of me wants to do nothing," she admitted. "Just buy Caroline's gift somewhere else and move on. But then I think about that young salesman, Daniel, the only person there who treated me with respect. And I think about all the people who face that kind of judgment every day without any recourse." She met Alexander's gaze. "People like that need to understand that worth isn't determined by appearance. But I don't want vengeance. I want awareness." Alexander was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly, a plan already forming in his mind. "I think I might have an idea that accomplishes both." Maggie gave him a wary look. "Nothing too dramatic." Alexander smirked. "No buying the dealership." She rolled her eyes, but the corner of her mouth lifted slightly. And just like that, a shift had occurred. She wasn't walking away. Not this time. "And Maggie, I'm specifically interested in this car," Maggie stated calmly. "For my sister's birthday next month." Blake stepped away from the Harringtons, lowering his voice. "Look, I understand people like to dream, but this is a place of business. That vehicle will cost more than most homes. Now, I've been patient, but you're interrupting a legitimate sale." Several nearby customers had stopped to watch the uncomfortable exchange. Daniel hovered anxiously at the periphery. "I'm prepared to make a cash purchase today," Maggie said, maintaining her composure. That was when Blake's professional veneer completely cracked. He laughed, a short, harsh sound that echoed across the showroom floor. Several heads turned. "A cash purchase? Really?" His voice was louder now, designed to humiliate. "This isn't a yard sale. We're talking about $250,000. People who can afford these cars don't dress like—" He gestured dismissively at her outfit, "that." Maggie felt her cheeks flush, not from embarrassment, but from a slow-building anger. Not for herself, she'd experienced such treatment before, but for anyone who had ever been judged by their appearance. "I believe my money is as good as anyone else's," she said quietly. Blake stepped closer, towering over her. "Let me be clear," he said, no longer bothering to hide his disdain. "You are wasting my time and embarrassing yourself. Either make an appointment for a serious discussion, dressed appropriately, or please leave the premises." The showroom had gone silent. The Harringtons had stepped away from the car, visibly uncomfortable. "Is there a problem here?" A new voice joined the conversation. The dealership's owner, Richard Mason, had been attracted by the commotion. Blake straightened his tie. "No problem, sir. Just explaining to this lady that we operate by appointment for serious buyers." Richard Mason assessed the situation quickly, taking in Maggie's simple appearance and the watching crowd. His expression made it clear which side he was taking. "I see," he said. "Ms. Collins," Maggie supplied. "Margaret Collins." "Ms. Collins, perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. Our clientele typically, well, they understand the exclusivity of our vehicles." "I understand perfectly," Maggie replied, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. "Your sales manager has made your policies quite clear." Blake stepped forward again, his voice dripping with condescension. "If you're genuinely interested, which I doubt, you can call for an appointment. But I'd suggest bringing proof of funds. And dressing the part. These cars," he gestured around the showroom, "are for a certain class of people." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Someone snickered. Maggie looked around, at the judging faces, at Blake's smug expression, at the owner's tacit approval of his employees' behavior. She'd faced discrimination before, but rarely so blatantly, so publicly. "I see," she said simply. With dignity intact but spirits bruised, she turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, she heard Blake's voice, not quite quiet enough. "Some people just don't know their place." As she pushed through the glass doors into the morning sunlight, Maggie pulled out her phone. The humiliation stung, but a small, resolute smile formed on her lips as she dialed. The Collins estate sat on 5 quiet acres outside Boston, its understated elegance revealing nothing of the billions behind its ownership. Alexander Collins preferred it that way. At 41, the tech visionary had revolutionized renewable energy storage technology, building a fortune while maintaining a deliberately low profile. When Maggie entered his home office, Alexander looked up from his desk, immediately setting aside his work. 15 years of marriage had taught him to read her expressions with precision. Something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, moving around the desk to meet her. Maggie sank into a leather chair, the morning's events washing over her anew. "It was educational," she said with a wry smile that didn't reach her eyes. She recounted the experience at the dealership, The condescension, the humiliation, the blatant discrimination. As she spoke, Alexander's expression darkened, but he remained silent, giving her the space to process. "It's not about me," she concluded. "I have the privilege of walking away knowing the truth. But how many people get treated that way every day, without the comfort of knowing they actually could afford what they're being denied?" Alexander nodded thoughtfully. In their years together, this was what had always moved him most about Maggie, her consistent concern for others, even when she herself had been wronged. "So what would you like to do about it?" he asked finally. "Part of me wants to do nothing," she admitted. "Just buy Caroline's gift elsewhere. But then I think about that young salesman, Daniel, who treated me with respect regardless of how I was dressed. And I think about all the people who face that kind of judgment without having any recourse." She looked directly at Alexander. "These people need to understand that worth isn't determined by appearance. But I don't want vengeance. I want awareness." Alexander nodded slowly, a plan forming. "I think I might have an idea that accomplishes both." "Nothing too dramatic," Maggie warned, knowing her husband's protective instincts. "No buying the dealership," Alexander laughed. "Nothing so cliché. But maybe," he leaned forward, eyes twinkling, "a little education is in order." Together, they crafted a plan, not for revenge, but for enlightenment. Something that might change perspectives more effectively than simple retribution. "Are you sure you don't want to come along?" Alexander asked when they'd finalized the details. Maggie shook her head. "This isn't about me needing to witness their comeuppance. It's about them learning to see beyond appearances." She paused, then added with a smile, "But I expect a full report." As evening settled over their home, Alexander made several phone calls, setting things in motion for the following morning. Tomorrow would bring a powerful lesson in humility and the danger of assumptions. Not just for Blake Thompson, but for everyone at Boston Luxury Motors. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button and join our community of story lovers. Now, let's get back to see what happens next. The following morning arrived with picture-perfect weather. Blake Thompson entered Boston Luxury Motors with a confident stride, straightening his signature blue tie. Yesterday's incident with the underdressed woman had become an amusing anecdote he'd shared over drinks with colleagues. Another delusional dreamer thinking she belonged in the world of luxury. The showroom gleamed under carefully positioned lights, exotic cars arranged strategically to maximize their allure. Blake had just finished the morning staff meeting, emphasizing the importance of qualifying customers properly. Remember, he'd instructed the sales team, "Our time is valuable. We cater to a specific clientele. It's not elitism. It's efficiency." Daniel, the young salesman, had remained quiet during the meeting, his discomfort evident. Blake made a mental note to have a word with him about proper customer assessment. At precisely 10:17 a.m., the distinctive purr of an exceptional engine drew attention outside. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a vehicle unlike any other glided to a stop directly in front of the main entrance. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Even Blake, typically unimpressed by luxury vehicles given his daily proximity to them, felt his pulse quicken. A Rolls-Royce Phantom. Extended wheelbase. But not just any Phantom. This was a custom model, with a unique midnight blue finish that seemed to shift colors in the sunlight. Conservative estimates would place its value north of $1.2 million. "Is that?" Richard Mason, the owner, had emerged from his office, drawn by the sudden silence. "The special Phantom," Blake confirmed, already moving toward the entrance. An extremely rare configuration. A uniformed chauffeur exited the Rolls-Royce and walked around to open the rear passenger door. From the vehicle emerged a man of commanding presence. Tall. Impeccably dressed. Alexander Collins. Blake's mind raced. The name sounded vaguely familiar. And then realization hit. His stomach twisted. "Mr. Collins, I." Alexander's gaze remained unreadable. "Let's talk about customer service." "But I wasn't aware of all the details." Alexander nodded thoughtfully. "The details include your sales manager here suggesting that people like her don't belong in an establishment like this, based solely on her casual attire." By now, a small crowd had gathered, other salespeople, support staff, and even a few early customers. The showroom had gone completely silent. "Mr. Collins," Blake began, desperation creeping into his voice. "If there was any misunderstanding—" "It wasn't a misunderstanding," Daniel suddenly spoke up. All eyes turned to the young salesman, who looked surprised at his own courage. "Mrs. Collins was treated poorly," he continued. "She was polite and specific about her interest in the Azure, and she was dismissed repeatedly based on her appearance." Blake shot Daniel a withering look, but the damage was done. Alexander turned back to Richard Mason. You know, it's interesting. My wife founded and runs the Collins Foundation for Children with Disabilities. It's been her life's work since before I met her. She's raised over $50 million for specialized medical equipment and educational programs. He paused, letting that sink in. Maggie chooses to dress simply because she believes in living modestly despite our means. She finds it keeps her connected to the families she helps. It's one of the countless reasons I love her. Richard Mason had gone pale. Mr. Collins, I assure you, this does not reflect the values of our dealership. We pride ourselves on. Actions speak louder than mission statements, Mr. Mason, Alexander interrupted firmly. Now, regarding the Azure, I'm not here to purchase just one vehicle. Blake perked up slightly, a glimmer of professional hope breaking through his distress. I was planning to purchase the Azure for my wife's sister, as Maggie intended. But I was also considering a fleet replacement for our corporate vehicles, 7 in total. And my personal collection could use updating as well. Mason's eyes widened. A sale of that magnitude would make their quarterly targets in a single transaction. However, Alexander continued, I find myself questioning whether this is the right establishment for such a significant investment. The silence in the showroom was absolute. Blake looked physically ill. Mr. Collins, Richard began desperately, I cannot apologize enough for this unfortunate incident. I assure you, this is not how we conduct business. Please, allow us to make this right. Alexander considered this for a moment. Perhaps there is a way forward, he said finally. But it would require more than just selling me cars. Anything, Richard assured him quickly. The Collins Foundation is hosting a benefit gala next month. We're raising funds for a new adaptive sports complex for children with physical disabilities. Blake, he turned to the mortified sales manager. I think your presence would be educational. Blake swallowed hard. Sir. Not as a guest, Alexander clarified. As a volunteer. The foundation is always looking for people to help with setup, to assist the children, to see firsthand the work being done. The implications were clear. This wasn't just about selling cars anymore, it was about learning a fundamental lesson in human value. Additionally, Alexander continued, addressing Richard Mason, the dealership might consider implementing a training program on unconscious bias. I know several excellent consultants. Richard nodded emphatically. Absolutely. We would welcome such an initiative. As for the vehicles, Alexander turned to Daniel, the young salesman who had spoken up. I'd like you to handle all the paperwork, starting with the Azure for my sister-in-law. Daniel's eyes widened. Me? Thank you, sir. I'd be honored. Good, Alexander said with finality. Now, shall we discuss the specifics of the corporate fleet? As they moved toward Mason's office, Alexander paused in front of the Azure, running his hand along its sleek contour. My wife has excellent taste, doesn't she? Behind them, Blake Thompson stood motionless, his perfect world fundamentally altered. The harsh truth had finally dawned on him. He had revealed his character not by how he treated those he thought important, but by how he treated those he believed were not. 1 month later, the Collins Foundation Benefit Gala transformed the Grand Boston Hotel into a celebration of possibility. Children with various disabilities and their families mingled with donors, medical professionals, and supporters. Near the entrance, Blake Thompson, dressed not in his usual attire, but in the event staff uniform, directed guests and assisted a young boy in a wheelchair. The past month had changed him profoundly. His volunteer work at the foundation had started as an obligation, the price of professional survival. But something unexpected had happened. He had witnessed the challenges these children faced daily, and the dignity with which they met them. Across the room, Maggie Collins, elegant in a simple blue dress, approached him. Despite knowing who she was now, Blake was struck again by her lack of pretension. How are you finding the experience, Blake? She asked. He considered the question seriously. Humbling, he finally answered. And necessary. Maggie nodded. Thomas seems to have taken a liking to you, she observed, referring to the boy in the wheelchair. He's teaching me about adaptive basketball, Blake admitted. Apparently, I have terrible form. This drew a genuine laugh from Maggie. He's an honest coach. Blake's expression grew serious. Mrs. Collins, I know I've apologized formally, but I need to say it directly. I'm truly sorry for how I treated you. There's no excuse. You're right, there isn't, she agreed, but without malice. The question is, what have you learned? That worth isn't determined by appearance, position, or possessions, he said thoughtfully. And that everyone deserves respect until they prove otherwise, not the other way around. Good lessons, Maggie acknowledged. Expensive ones, too, I imagine. Blake nodded, truly thinking of the substantial business the dealership had lost when Alexander Collins decided to purchase only the Azure and not the additional fleet. Worth every penny, he replied sincerely. Across the room, Alexander joined them, placing a gentle hand on his wife's shoulder. Blake was just sharing some of his insights, Maggie explained. Alexander nodded. I hear you've become quite involved with the adaptive sports program. Yes, sir. In fact, I've signed up to continue volunteering after my required period. He hesitated, then added, and I've been working with Mr. Mason on revamping our customer approach at the dealership. No more qualifying by appearance. I'm glad to hear it, Alexander said. Then, to Blake's surprise, he added, which reminds me, about that corporate fleet I mentioned. We're still in the market. Perhaps you could handle that transaction. Daniel speaks highly of how you've been mentoring him. Blake's expression registered shock before settling into genuine gratitude. I would be honored, Mr. Collins. Truly honored. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Blake watched Maggie and Alexander Collins working the room, not flaunting their wealth or influence, but connecting genuinely with each child and family. He reflected on how completely his perception had been transformed. A month ago, he would have dismissed someone like Maggie Collins based on her casual appearance. Now, he understood that true value ran deeper than designer labels, luxury cars, or executive titles. As Blake helped Thomas back into his wheelchair after a photo session, the boy grinned up at him. You know what, Mr. Blake? You're pretty cool for a grown-up. Blake smiled. Coming from you, Thomas, that's the highest compliment I've received in a very long time. And he meant it. We all make judgments based on appearances, don't we? But as Blake Thompson discovered, looking beyond the surface can reveal extraordinary people and life-changing opportunities. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and join our community of story lovers. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever misjudged someone based on their appearance or been misjudged yourself? Your experiences might inspire others. And remember, the true measure of wealth has nothing to do with your bank account. It's about how you treat others when you think no one important is watching. See you in our next story, where another powerful lesson awaits.